At family dinner, Laura Lancaster toasted, "Here's to our lonely old hag in the back house." Iris, 76, widow and matriarch, didn't flinch. She lifted her glass, filled with champagne bought the day she sold their home. By morning, Laura and Tom would have 30 days to vacate. For years, Iris let them believe she was powerless. Now the deed and the eviction notice would prove otherwise. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The dining room table gleamed under the weight of polished silverware, heirloom china, and a roast that had cost Laura Lancaster 4 hours and one perfectly curated Instagram story. A dozen guests circled the table, neighbors, family, a local councilman's wife, all seated beneath the dimmed glow of a wrought iron chandelier. Conversation buzzed with manicured politeness until Laura rose, champagne flute raised, smile syrupy and slow. "To the next generation," she said, voice gliding like honey over thorns, "and to our lonely old hag who still lurks in the back house." Laughter fluttered across the table like startled birds. Awkward, too high, too fast. A few guests looked down. One cleared her throat. Tom Lancaster coughed into his napkin, pretending to find something fascinating on his plate. Only one person didn't move. Iris Lancaster, 76, widow matriarch, sat perfectly upright at the far end of the table. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly raised her glass, tilted it toward her daughter-in-law, and drank. The silence that followed rang louder than Laura's words. Under the table, Bridget, 19 and sharp-eyed behind quiet demeanor, reached out and gently squeezed her grandmother's hand. Iris didn't look at her, but her thumb responded with a firm press. Dinner continued, awkwardly. Conversation scrambled to resume. Golf handicaps, HOA dues, someone's new rescue spaniel. Iris didn't speak. She chewed slowly, drank water instead of wine, and observed, always observing. She declined dessert, as she always did. Laura made a point to announce the key lime tart was gluten-free, though some of us wouldn't know what gluten even is. More laughs, fewer this time. By the time the dishes were cleared and the guests were politely shuffling toward the foyer, Iris had already placed her cloth napkin neatly on the table and excused herself. No drama, no farewell hug, just a faint, controlled smile and a simple, "Thank you for dinner, Laura." The roast was tender. She walked out the side door, heels tapping softly on the brick path that connected the main house to the guest house, a modest cottage she'd moved into after her husband's passing. She'd insisted on it at the time. "Let them have the space," she had said. "I'll be just fine back here." She let herself in, locked the door behind her, and exhaled. The guest house was quiet, dimly lit by the porch light filtering through the kitchen window. A crocheted throw rested on the back of her rocking chair. Her cat, Mabel, stirred from her perch and blinked at her before curling back into sleep. Iris crossed the room with steady hands and opened the side drawer of her antique secretary desk. Inside was a battered old cassette recorder. She pressed play. Her late husband's voice crackled to life, familiar, deep, warm. "The deed stays in your name, always. That's non-negotiable. No matter what the boy or his wife say later, you earned this house long before they were ever part of it." Iris listened to the message twice. Then she stood, walked to the hall closet, and reached behind a row of unused winter coats. Her fingers found the lockbox. She pulled it free, set it on the dining table, and opened it with a small brass key she wore on a chain beneath her blouse. Inside, the original deed. Her name, alone. Beneath that, a worn business card. Carter Webb, Estate Law, Charleston. In the corner, his familiar handwriting, "Call any time. Still your ally." She ran a finger over the card's raised lettering, then picked up the cordless phone beside her. Paused. Didn't dial. Not yet. Instead, she stood and walked to the mirror over her fireplace, tall, gold-leafed, beveled edges dulled with age. She looked at her reflection for a long moment. No makeup, no pretense. A silver bun, steel-gray eyes, and a jawline that hadn't lost its edge. A faint smile broke across her face. Not joy, not bitterness. Something older, something colder. Resolve. From outside, through the open kitchen window, came Laura's shriek of laughter. Loud, thoughtless, triumphant. Iris turned toward the window, listening. Then she walked back to the desk, picked up the phone, and dialed. The line rang once before a man's voice answered, calm and steady. "This is Carter Webb." Iris didn't waste a breath. "I'm ready to talk." The next morning brought a gauzy, salt-thick fog to the marsh edges of suburban Charleston. Iris Lancaster arrived at Carter Webb's office just as the shutters were creaking open. His practice was housed in a converted antebellum with peeling white columns and a plaque so discreet it barely admitted his name. She liked that about him. He never needed to announce power. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Carter rose as she entered, still lean in his mid-50s, wearing the same quiet authority he'd had when he and her late husband had drawn up the original trust documents. "I thought I might hear from you after that birthday dinner," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. "It wasn't a birthday dinner," Iris replied, removing her gloves one finger at a time. "It was a performance. I just hadn't decided whether I was the audience or the finale." Carter offered a dry smile and slid a folder across the desk. "I pulled everything you and Henry signed. Clean title, full ownership. Tom and Laura were granted occupancy, not equity, which means I can sell the house outright with 30 days' notice," Iris finished. Carter nodded, and moved them out without so much as a second signature. For the first time in weeks, her chest loosened. "Then I'd like to begin." He took out a legal pad and clicked his pen. "Quiet sale or public listing?" "Quiet and discreet. I don't want it paraded through Zillow like some foreclosure." Carter scribbled something. "I'll initiate the early paperwork. You'll need a stager and a buffer." "I've already called Margot," Iris said, eyes gleaming. "She owes me a favor, or 5. As she stood to leave, Carter's tone gentled. "You know they'll come at you sideways, especially her." "I expect nothing less." Back at the guest house, Iris found Bridget waiting on the porch swing, cross-legged in sweatpants, her textbook abandoned on her lap. A tray rested beside her, with steeping chamomile and a warm biscuit folded in a linen napkin. "I figured you'd need tea," Bridget said, standing and brushing crumbs from her sleeve. "After last night." Iris took the mug and sat beside her, the steam softening the edges of the morning chill. For a moment, they just watched the Spanish moss drift in the breeze. "You didn't deserve that," Bridget said quietly. Iris stared into her tea, the surface rippling slightly from the wind. Deserve has very little to do with what people allow themselves to say. They sat together for a while, the kind of silence only blood understands. By Friday, Laura was striding through the kitchen in white linen and lip gloss, shrieking into her speakerphone about wine pairings and salmon soufflé. She was hosting a brunch for the HOA wives, a performative little circus she threw bi-monthly to remind the neighborhood who ruled the cul-de-sac, as if her interior design awards weren't already doing the heavy lifting. Not once did she mention inviting Iris. It didn't matter. By Sunday, Iris and Margot had scheduled a team of professional stagers. The plan, wait until Laura left for her upcoming girls' spa retreat in Asheville, then transform the home in 3 quiet days. No fanfare, no warning, just meticulous, calculated change. They met under the pretense of catching up in the greenhouse behind Margot's small realty office. Surrounded by orchids and cracked pots, the 2 women spoke like poker players over a table neither would flip. "I've already pulled comps," Margot said, adjusting her readers. "We price it high and let them think it's a seller's market. Buyers with money won't blink." "And the family furniture? Stored or donated? Your call, just don't let her catch wind." "I won't," Iris said. "She doesn't see me unless she's performing for someone else." As they finalized details, the garden door creaked open. Deacon Shaw stepped in, Bible under one arm, soft hat in hand. "Didn't mean to interrupt, just dropping off some preserves," he said, nodding toward Iris. "You're looking lighter these days, Miss Iris." "Maybe it's the weather," she offered, though her eyes said otherwise. He studied her, then smiled faintly. "Plotting peace, are we?" She didn't answer. But when he left, the corners of her mouth curved ever so slightly. That evening, as Laura posted a group selfie from her bubble bath retreat with the caption, "Self-care with the best bitches," Iris sat in her study, circling a date on her calendar. 3 weeks. That's all she needed. She capped her pen, tucked it into the spine of a leather-bound ledger, and clicked off the lamp. In the dark, Mabel purred softly on the windowsill. But Iris didn't move. She was listening for any creak in the main house, any signal that her plan might unravel. There was nothing, only stillness. And in that stillness, she allowed herself one thought. Let them brunch. They had no idea the house they were sipping mimosas in was already for sale. By the time Laura posted her third spa selfie, this one mid-facial, robe slipping just enough for a flirt of shoulder, Iris was unlocking the front door of the main house with the set of keys she'd never returned. The stagers arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, 2 trucks, 5 professionals, all white-glove quiet, no logos, no chatter. Margot had handpicked them, discreet, efficient, and utterly indifferent to drama. Inside, the house exhaled its secrets. Gone was the curated clutter of Laura's performance life, the oversized farmhouse signs with faux vintage fonts, the strategically placed cookbooks she never opened, the blown glass centerpiece she'd insisted was artisan, but still had a Marshall's sticker on the bottom. Room by room, the stagers stripped the space to its bones. Neutral tones, minimalist accents, light that breathed. Iris watched from the hallway, arms folded over a cardigan, her presence as quiet as the ticking grandfather clock that hadn't chimed in years. It wasn't erasure, it was reclamation. She paused at the base of the stairwell and let her gaze land on a chair in the front foyer. Carved walnut, hand-finished, her father's last gift before he passed. She'd chosen its fabric herself, a dusty blue brocade that Laura had once called too Depression-era chic, before stuffing it in a corner with a fern that kept dying. Iris walked over and laid a hand on the curved armrest. The grain was still warm from sunlight, and beneath the seat cushion, a tiny brass nameplate gleamed. To Iris, for all you carried. Without a word, she motioned for one of the movers. "This one's mine," she said. "Take it back to the guest house." Bridget arrived around noon, notebook in hand, camera slung across her chest. She'd taken a break from her summer creative writing workshop, claiming she needed a new setting for a photo essay on disappearing American homes. They both knew better. "You okay if I shoot before the reset?" she asked, voice soft but purposeful. Iris nodded. Capture what they never appreciated. Bridget moved through the house in silence, snapping moments that would have made Laura scream. A chipped tile in the laundry room, the peeling paint near the fireplace Iris had warned them about, the half-empty bottle of store-brand olive oil in the open pantry. Her camera lingered on small things, the dust ring around where a forgotten vase had sat too long, the hallway shadowed from never drawing back the curtains. While Bridget documented, Iris met with Margot in the upstairs study. 2 showings, Margot whispered, flipping through a leather-bound folder. Private, both pre-approved. No signs. No listings. First one's a retired art history professor and his husband. The second couple's from Savannah, downsizing after the youngest left for college. Iris's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her teacup. Let's be kind to whoever inherits the burden. They both knew she didn't mean the house. That evening, Tom wandered into the kitchen. The lights were different now, cooler, brighter, intentional. He glanced around, squinting slightly. A few chairs had moved. The hutch was missing. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla, usually pumped from an artificial diffuser, had been replaced with fresh lemon and sage from a bowl Iris had placed on the counter. He opened the fridge. The lemon tarts Laura had prepped for post-spa brunch were gone. In their place, a labeled dish from Iris's guest house, chicken salad with capers wrapped in wax paper, her handwriting still precise after all these years. He closed the fridge, said nothing, and walked out. Later that night, in the dim lamplight of her study, Iris pulled out a folder Carter had couriered over. A new will. She read it through once, then again, before signing in 3 places. Bridget's name appeared near the top as future executor of a women's literacy trust to be funded by the majority of the house's profits. Nothing would go to Tom or Laura, not because of anger, but because of clarity. They had taken space. They had never built legacy. As she slid the signed document back into its envelope, a soft chime echoed through her laptop, an email from Margot. Subject, showing number 1, full ask, no contingencies. She stared at the screen, then clicked it open. A single sentence lit the display. They want it, 21-day close. Iris closed the laptop. Her eyes didn't water. Her hands didn't shake. Instead, she stood, walked to the guest house window, and looked out toward the dark outline of the main house. The porch light flickered once, then went out. The invitation arrived folded in half, printed on cardstock thicker than necessary. Laura had handwritten each guest's name in loopy cursive, her L's and O's so ornamental they looked like they were trying too hard to be elegant. Iris placed hers on the mantel, unread. She didn't need to. The intent was already obvious. Laura was back from Asheville, tan, toned, and eager to reclaim her throne. A dinner party, intimate, curated, just family. Another spotlight performance disguised as hospitality. By the time guests began arriving, the house was scrubbed clean of any trace of the recent showings. Fresh flowers, polished wine glasses, a hand-lettered chalkboard near the entryway read, "Home is where your story begins." Iris stepped into the foyer in a slate-gray wrap dress, nothing flashy but regal in its restraint. Her silver bun was pinned tighter than usual, her lipstick a shade darker than she'd worn in years. Laura greeted her at the door with a smile that nearly cracked her glossed lips. "Mother Iris," she said, arms outstretched as if she hadn't called her a hag barely a week prior. "You made it." "I live here," Iris replied, stepping past her. Inside, the dining room table had been extended and set for 10. Linen napkins, votives flickering in delicate mercury glass holders, wine already breathing. Except Iris's name card wasn't there. Instead, her place was set at the breakfast nook in the corner, a cramped little table usually reserved for visiting toddlers or stray in-laws, 2 mismatched chairs, a paper napkin. Laura's voice chimed sweetly behind her. "We ran out of room. Hope you don't mind sitting over there. It's cozier." Bridget's jaw tensed across the room, but Iris only smiled faintly and took her seat without protest. She smoothed her napkin over her lap, folded her hands, and waited. Dinner began. Roasted duck, buttered green beans with toasted almonds, the kind of menu Laura made more for show than for taste. Tom carved in silence, casting glances Iris's way without daring to make eye contact. When he reached for the wine bottle, his hands trembled just slightly. He poured for everyone, except her. Bridget rose mid-meal and excused herself. A moment later, she reappeared beside Iris and placed something gently on the table, a folded slip of notebook paper, still warm from her palm. Iris opened it quietly. "The house looks better without them." A low laugh escaped her, nearly inaudible beneath the clink of forks and murmured conversation. It wasn't spiteful, it was the sound of a storm cloud rolling in from far off, distant, certain, inevitable. She reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone, and beneath the tablecloth pressed one button. Carter Webb. The line rang twice. When his voice came on the line, she didn't wait for pleasantries. "It's time," she said. "Serve notice." She ended the call before he could respond. Back at the main table, Laura was mid-toast again. Of course. "To fresh starts," she purred, raising her glass. "To cleaner slates and brighter futures, and to knowing when it's time to pass the torch. Or the title deed." That got a few laughs. Tom didn't join in this time. He glanced once toward the breakfast nook, his face blank, but his eyes flickering with something older. Regret, maybe. Or dread. Bridget raised her own glass, barely hiding her smirk. Iris didn't toast. She simply sat, watching the scene like one might study a fireplace that hadn't yet realized it was out of wood. After dessert, some oversweetened brulee that crackled like it had something to hide, Iris stood and excused herself with a soft, "Thank you for dinner." She turned, walked to the front hallway, and paused beneath the staircase. Her chair, the one she had reclaimed, sat there now, alone but dignified, its blue brocade untouched. She ran her fingers over its edge once, then stepped outside. The sky was clear, unusually quiet. A breeze moved through the magnolia leaves like breath held and released. Back in the main house, Laura's laughter bubbled up again, this time louder, sharper, more performative than ever. She didn't know. Not yet. But within 24 hours, she would. The morning the letter arrived, the air smelled like scorched dust and dogwood bloom. Charleston heat pressed through the brick like breath, and Laura, barefoot, coffee in one hand, silk robe barely tied, heard the knock as she passed the kitchen island, muttering to herself about her ruined centerpiece. She opened the front door expecting a delivery. Instead, Carter Webb stood calmly on the front porch, pressed navy suit, hair neatly parted, a folder tucked beneath his arm. Behind him, the world kept on. Birds chattered. A lawn sprinkler hissed across the cul-de-sac. But in the doorway, time contracted. Laura blinked. "Carter, what a surprise." "I'm here on behalf of Iris Lancaster," he said evenly. "May I step inside?" Laura's smile flattened. "This isn't really a good time. We're in the middle of a—" "This won't take long." He handed her the envelope. She opened it casually, like a holiday card. Her eyes skimmed the first few lines, then slowed. Stopped. The paper trembled in her hand. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, voice sharp enough to make the dog bark from the next room. 30-day notice of termination of occupancy, Carter replied, per the trust agreement signed by Henry Lancaster and Iris Lancaster in 1998. You were granted residency, not ownership. Iris retains full title. She has elected to exercise her right to sell. Tom appeared behind her in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, scratching his temple. "What's going on?" he asked sleepily. Laura whirled. "He says we have 30 days to get out, that your mother is selling the house." Tom blinked. "Wait, this isn't even in my name?" "No," Carter said. "It never was." Laura turned back to Carter, fury rising from her chest like smoke from a fire. "You can't do this. This is our home." From the end of the walkway, another voice answered. "I can," Iris said, stepping forward. She was in full linen, hat on, gloves tucked under one arm like armor. "And I did." Laura's breath caught as if she'd been slapped. Iris didn't flinch. "You never owned it, Laura. You just lived here," she said, "on my dime, with my name still on the deed. You thought I was a fixture. Turns out I'm the foundation." Laura looked to Tom, desperate for backup. "Say something." He opened his mouth, closed it, then muttered, "You told me the trust had been changed. You said she gave it up." "I never said that," she hissed, but her voice cracked. Carter handed Tom a second copy of the letter. "You'll find the full terms inside. Move-out checklist, buyer timeline, and confirmation of enforcement. Iris is within her legal rights." From the edge of the living room, Bridget stood silently, arms crossed. No smirk, no glee, just eyes clear and unblinking, like she was watching a mask fall. The door slammed. Inside the house, Laura screamed. The kind of scream that wasn't meant for pain, but for control. A guttural panic coated in rage, something fragile shattering against a wall. Iris turned and walked back toward the guest house, the crunch of gravel beneath her steps calm, deliberate. Back inside, Bridget quietly followed, pausing only to glance down at the paper in Tom's hand. She said nothing to him. He said nothing to her. That afternoon, the packing began. Bridget started in the guest house, pulling down Iris's antique figurines, the ones Laura had tried to convince her to donate for charity clutter tax. She wrapped each one in linen napkins. Iris supervised without hovering, sitting in her rocker, sipping chilled sweet tea from a mason jar. "They'll get nasty," Bridget said quietly. "They already did," Iris replied. "Now they're just loud about it." In the hallway, Iris's wedding photo came down from its hook. Bridget handed it to her with both hands. "Where do you want this?" Iris looked at the frame a long moment. "Not packed. Not yet." As they worked, a soft knock landed on the screen door. Deacon Shaw stepped inside, hat in hand, his usual gentle presence like a steady rhythm beneath all the noise. "Afternoon, Miss Iris," he said. "Heard about the letter?" Iris raised an eyebrow. That was fast. "Well, Laura has never been known for subtle exits," he replied with a quiet grin. Someone threw a centerpiece, broke a glass swan. Iris sipped her tea. Tacky. He stepped forward and placed a small bundle on the table, jarred preserves wrapped in burlap ribbon. This is grace in motion, he said. You've always been patient. Sometimes God waits until the righteous are tired enough to act. Iris met his eyes. This isn't wrath, Deacon. I know it isn't, he said. It's justice with better posture. The door clicked shut behind him. By nightfall, the house was quieter than it had been in years. Even Laura's fury had faded into walls that no longer listened. In her study, Iris opened the window. The moonlight landed in a slant across her ledger. She drew a single line through a penciled-in date. Closing day, confirmed. By sunrise, the glass swan was gone from the foyer and replaced by a post on Facebook. A filtered photo of the house, rose gold sky in the background, heavy with sentimentality, sat above a block of text Laura had written at 3 a.m., still seething in her silk robe. It's sad when the elderly become mentally unstable and lash out at family. Pray for those dealing with difficult aging parents, especially ones who forget what was gifted to them out of love. Some of us are just trying to protect what's sacred. Within hours, the comments began. Sending hugs, girl. So unfair. Don't let her gaslight you. She's always been difficult. Bridget saw it first, of course. She forwarded the screenshots to Iris without commentary. The subject line of the email simply read, typical. Iris was in the guest house sunroom slicing figs for jam when she opened the email. She read each comment slowly, as if studying a menu at a restaurant she had no intention of ordering from. She didn't react. Instead, she tapped twice on the screen to save the post, then again to save the comments. Then she opened a new message and attached them all to Carter. Subject, defamation. Let me know if this qualifies. Carter's reply came less than 20 minutes later. 100%, drafting a cease and desist. Shall I send it directly? Iris typed back one line. Make it polite, but condescending. That afternoon, the post disappeared, but Laura's fury metastasized. Bridget appeared at the guest house with a tight smile and a half laugh that never made it past her lips. I got added to a group chat, she said, holding up her phone. Accidentally, I think. Or maybe not. She scrolled as Iris leaned in. Screenshots flashed by. Laura and a few of the HOA women, dragging Iris's name like it was wallpaper that refused to peel. I swear, she talks to that cat like it's a person. Who names their teacups? Bridget's just manipulating her for the will. Bridget sighed. I can leave the chat if it's too much. No, Iris said coolly. Stay. People reveal more when they think no one's watching. Laura tried again later that evening, this time tagging the house in a memory photo on Instagram with the caption, So many beautiful years. Grateful for what can't be taken away. Iris responded with nothing. She never commented, never called, never stooped. Instead, she opened a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and slipped a clean photocopy of the house deed inside. Her name, her date, her terms. She walked it out to the front mailbox, addressed it with slow, purposeful handwriting, and raised the red flag. No note, no warning, just the truth. Inside the house, Laura would find it by breakfast. But by then it wouldn't matter, because buyers were circling. That evening, Margot called with a voice thick with disbelief. They're bidding over asking. I've got one couple adding an art studio clause and a retention bonus. Another offered to cover your moving costs even though you're not moving. Iris blinked. Then we let them. The one from Savannah wants to write a letter, something about preserving your legacy. Iris paused. Have them send it. I want to see who deserves it. As she hung up, the landline rang again, this time slower, hesitating between each ring like it didn't want to be answered. She let it go to voicemail. Tom's voice followed, low and strained. Hey, Mom. Look, I know things have gotten messy. Maybe there's still a way we can talk through this? I mean, 30 days is pretty extreme. You know, Laura, she gets heated, but she doesn't mean it. Iris stared at the machine like it was a relic, then picked up the receiver, pressed redial, and waited. Tom answered quickly like he'd been holding the phone. Hello? She didn't even sit down. "Too late for Mom," she said, and hung up. Outside, the wind had picked up, shaking the wind chimes that Laura hated. A storm rolled in over the marsh, heat lightning flickering between live oaks like distant applause. Iris stepped out onto the porch, a glass of sherry in one hand. From where she stood, she could see Laura pacing behind the kitchen window, talking, gesturing, unraveling. Inside the envelope, still clutched in Laura's hand, was the name that had never left the deed: Iris Lancaster. And tomorrow, another offer was coming in. Saturday arrived without announcement, no flyers, no signs in the yard, no balloons, no cheap folding tables in the driveway like the open houses Laura had hosted back when she thought she'd become a real estate influencer. This wasn't for the public, it was for the right people. By 10 a.m., the front door stood ajar. Classical piano played softly through hidden speakers, the kind of music that made you slow your breath without realizing. Sunlight streamed through sheer linen curtains Iris had personally rehung, casting long gold bars across the polished floors. Bridget stood by the entryway, a simple white apron over her dress, a tray of lemon shortbread cookies balanced in one hand. She greeted each guest with the kind of warmth Laura had never quite mastered, quiet, sincere, unpolished but magnetic. "Please take your time," she told them. "It's a house that notices who's paying attention." The first hour passed gently. A pair of retired professors from Chapel Hill admired the library built-ins. A local couple paused long over the clawfoot tub Iris had fought to preserve when Tom wanted it gutted for a spa shower. Even the smallest touches, the pressed napkins in the guest room, the camellia branches arranged in the foyer vase, held intention. But it wasn't until the Callaways arrived that the house truly shifted. They came without an agent. Late 50s, casual, she wore wire-rimmed glasses and a paint-smudged scarf. He walked with a slight limp and eyes that lingered on the crown molding like it was sacred. "We're artists," the woman said, offering her hand to Iris, who stood with her back to the fireplace, a thin silver necklace resting against her collarbone. "We've been looking for something with history," Iris finished. "You're standing in it." The woman smiled. "Then we won't waste your time." Iris gave them the real tour herself, just the main floor and garden. No marketing language, no pitch, just details, memories, stories told with restraint and wit. She showed them the hand-carved banister her late husband had polished every December, the rose bush out back that never bloomed for anyone but Bridget. "Everything here has been fought for," she said quietly, as they stood by the dining room window. "That's not always a bad thing." The Callaways didn't ask about Laura or Tom. If they noticed anything, like the missing family portraits or the echo in the upstairs hallway, they said nothing. Before they left, the husband handed Iris a cream-colored envelope. Inside, an offer. Full price, no contingencies, closing in 21 days. She didn't smile, not quite, but something behind her eyes softened. By late afternoon, the house was quiet again. Margot returned from another private showing to find Iris alone on the back patio, garden gloves on, dirt under her nails. "Well?" Iris asked, not looking up. "They made it official. We're under contract," Margot said. "The Callaways don't want to haggle. They said the house felt chosen." "It did the choosing," Iris replied. Margot handed her a pen and the final paperwork. Iris signed without flourish. "You sure you want to stay in the guest house?" Margot asked gently. "You could start fresh." "I already have," Iris said, standing, "and I'm not done watching this story unfold." She pulled off her gloves and walked into the garden, her garden. The early summer blooms were peaking, petals opening just slightly past their prime. She passed the magnolia tree she'd planted the year Tom was born. Its roots ran deep, unnoticed by the family who now called it the big messy thing that drops leaves. She paused beside a small sign Bridget had made from an old fence slat and a wood-burning tool. "Planted with intention, left to no one by accident." Iris ran her fingers across the grain. Then, from the direction of the main house, barefoot on the lawn, glass of wine in one hand, Laura appeared, watching. She hadn't spoken to Iris in days. Not since the envelope, not since the Facebook fallout, not since the silence had become louder than the threats. Now she was staring, unmoving, like she'd just realized the house wasn't reacting to her anymore. Iris didn't wave, didn't flinch. She simply turned and kept walking through the garden, her shadow long and peaceful behind her. At her feet, the soil was soft, and something new was growing. The invitation was handwritten, just like the one Laura had sent weeks earlier, but with a signature Iris touch. No flourishes, no exclamation points, no theme. Just 4 words: farewell dinner, Thursday, 7 p.m. It was slipped under the kitchen door in the early hours of the morning. Laura found it on her way to make coffee, still in her robe, bare feet brushing the tile. She read it once, twice, then smirked. Well, she said to no one, she finally folded. By dinner time Thursday, Laura had dressed to impress. Pearls, a soft blue dress that played nice with the lighting, a blowout that cost more than Iris's monthly grocery bill. She hummed as she arranged candles, fluffed napkins, and casually instructed Tom on how to set the table. "I mean, it's obviously a last-ditch peace gesture," she told him between swipes of lip gloss. "She's realized she can't win, not socially anyway. People don't side with bitterness." Tom didn't answer. He hadn't spoken much since the deed arrived in the mail. At 6:55, Iris arrived. Not from the back path that linked the guest house, but through the front door, which she let herself in with her own key. She wore navy crepe, a silk scarf draped effortlessly over her shoulder. Bridget followed behind her, carrying 2 bottles of champagne in a woven basket. Laura greeted them with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "You didn't need to go all out," she said, eyeing the bottles, but thoughtful. "It's tradition," Iris said. "I thought we'd honor it." The guests trickled in, just a small circle of those still willing to attend a dinner where the air buzzed with things unsaid. Margot, Deacon Shaw, one neighbor who had always quietly sided with Iris. The table had been set for 8. Laura played hostess as if nothing had changed. She passed hors d'oeuvres, made small talk about Charleston humidity, quipped about the market, the traffic, the latest HOA email thread. She was poised, glistening with practiced ease, until Iris stood up. The champagne had been chilling in a silver ice bucket by the sideboard. Iris moved to it now, lifting one bottle out with deliberate care. "Let me," she said before Laura could reach for it. With practiced hands, Iris loosened the wire cage and turned the bottle gently, not the cork. It popped with a soft, controlled hiss. Everyone fell quiet. Iris filled the glasses one by one, including her own last. Laura raised hers quickly. "To closure," she said, "and clean slates." Iris didn't clink glasses. Instead, she looked around the table. Her voice was steady, crisp. "This champagne," she said, "is from the same vineyard Henry and I toasted with on our wedding night. He had a case imported for our 10th anniversary and insisted we keep a few bottles untouched. Save them for something big," he said. "Something that feels like a beginning." She lifted her glass slightly. "To new beginnings," she said, letting her eyes linger on Laura for a heartbeat. "Mine." There was no mistaking it now. The table stilled. Even the candle flames seemed to lean in. She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 crisp manila folders, pre-labeled, sealed, stamped. She slid them across the table. "One for you," she said, looking at Tom. "And one for her." Laura frowned, already reaching. She opened the folder slowly, eyes darting across the first page. Final move-out checklist, transfer of utilities, buyer possession timeline. "No," she whispered. "Yes," Iris said softly. Laura's lip twitched. You're toasting this? This is petty." "It's clarity," Iris replied. "And it's legally binding." Bridget raised her glass and gently clinked it against Iris's. "To beginnings," she said. Iris smiled, fully, for the first time. Across the table, Laura sat frozen, her hand clenched around the folder. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, the way he did when confronted with anything resembling reality. Iris didn't wait for rebuttal. She took her seat, sipped her champagne, and let the silence hang like a velvet curtain, heavy and final. In the hallway, the old grandfather clock ticked louder than it had in years. Outside, headlights swept across the driveway. A moving truck had arrived, 2 days early. Sunday morning came with the muffled thrum of packing tape and the low groan of cardboard boxes being filled too fast. Tom stood in the kitchen with a Sharpie in hand, staring blankly at a half-empty drawer of serving spoons. Behind him, Laura was mid-tantrum, throwing a shoe across their bedroom, phone pressed to her ear demanding that Margot reverse this whole charade. "She can't still be living here," Laura snapped into the phone. "That was never part of the agreement." It was. It always had been. She just hadn't read the fine print. In the guest house, Iris sat at her kitchen table, a soft breeze moving through the open window as the contract lay in front of her. Carter Webb sat across from her, placing the final signature on the page with a slow, deliberate stroke. "It's done," he said. "Lease recorded. Rights secured. You'll retain permanent residence in the guest house for as long as you wish. Fully separate from the sale." "Good," Iris said. "I'm not ready to uproot what still flowers." He closed the folder and folded his hands. "Laura will accuse you of manipulation." "She already has," Iris replied, standing to walk to the stove. She poured 2 cups of coffee. "And I didn't manipulate. I negotiated." She handed him a cup, black. "She assumed winning meant being seen," Iris said quietly. "I stayed unseen and kept the ground." As if on cue, the screen door burst open. Laura stormed in, cheeks flushed, blouse half-tucked like she'd rushed out mid-rant. "You tricked us," she hissed. "You signed a deal behind our backs. You told everyone this was a farewell." Iris didn't look up from stirring her sugar. "I never said it was my farewell," she replied. Laura's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Rage flickered behind her eyes like a match she couldn't keep lit. Carter stood, gently setting down his coffee. "I'd advise against further outbursts, Mrs. Lancaster. Your signature on the original trust agreement was witnessed and notarized. The terms were clear then. They remain clear now." "I'm not calling you my attorney," Laura spat. "Which is why you're in this position," he replied with polite finality. Tom appeared in the doorway, a cardboard box cradled in his arms. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. "We're gonna have to find a place," he mumbled. "Rents are insane right now." Laura turned to him, appalled. "You're just accepting this?" He met Iris's eyes across the room, something wilted but knowing in his gaze. "She warned us." Bridget arrived moments later, paint swatches in one hand, a tool belt slung loosely around her waist like an ironic accessory. "Thought we'd start with the sunroom," she said cheerfully to Iris. "Cream? Or the same sage green you had when I was little?" "I trust your eye," Iris replied. Laura scoffed. "Oh, good. Now it's your little clubhouse." Bridget didn't even turn toward her. "We've got primer and rollers. You're welcome to help." "I'm not touching that place," Laura snapped, gesturing out the window toward the guest house. "It's beneath us." Carter smiled faintly. "And yet, it's the only place you're not entitled to." Laura stormed out. Tom followed slowly, like someone leaving a museum he didn't understand. The door didn't slam this time. It clicked, a quiet, definitive punctuation mark. Inside the guest house, Iris turned to Bridget. "Let's start with the east wall," she said. "It gets the morning light." Bridget grinned, flipping open the paint deck. "Then we'll make it shine." They moved a small table, cleared the space, and laid down a drop cloth. Mabel the cat circled once and settled into a corner, tail flicking in approval. As the brush hit the wall, long, confident strokes of a new beginning, Iris exhaled. Outside, a delivery van pulled into the driveway. Bridget peeked out the window. "You expecting something?" Iris shook her head. From the van, 2 men emerged, carrying a wooden crate stamped in gold, Hawthorne Estate Vineyards, Private Reserve. Bridget opened the door as they set it down. "Compliments of the Callaways," one of them said, "for the woman who gave a house its second life." Bridget stepped back, wide-eyed. Iris walked over, touched the lid, and smiled. Inside the house, Laura stood at the top of the staircase, staring down at an empty hallway, walls bare, memories peeled away. She heard the laughter outside, and for the first time she had nowhere to go. The movers arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, clean uniforms, clipboard in hand, and a box truck bearing no logo. Iris had insisted, no spectacle, just precision. The team leader knocked once on the guesthouse door. Iris answered in a crisp button-down and gardening gloves, sipping her second cup of coffee. "We're here for the main house," he said, glancing at his list. Iris nodded, stepping outside to meet him in the sun-warmed gravel. Instructions are in the foyer, marked items only. She walked him to the front porch, where 2 neat stacks of printed documents awaited. "Pack everything gently," she said, voice even. The man nodded. "But just to be clear," she added, her gaze drifting toward the upstairs bedroom window, where Laura's silhouette had just darted out of view, "you're to treat their things gently." She let a pause stretch. "I won't." By mid-morning, boxes lined the front walkway like soldiers, labeled in Bridget's handwriting, Laura's closet, Tom's office, miscellaneous, broken promises. Laura emerged at last, sunglasses on indoors, arms crossed over a robe she hadn't bothered to tie properly. "I need to speak to the foreman," she barked. "Of course," Iris said calmly, motioning to the clipboard-holding man down by the moving truck, "though I believe you'll find he only takes instruction from the woman whose name is still on the sale." Tom trailed behind, silent, a man carrying his own mistakes in a duffel bag. Inside, the rooms emptied in strange order. The guest bedroom was stripped before the master, the wine fridge unplugged before the photos were taken off the fridge. Iris walked through it all once, quietly. Laura's voice followed her from the hallway. "You're enjoying this?" Iris paused at the top of the stairs, not turning. "No," she said. "I enjoyed my life here. You made sure that stopped. This," she gestured to the emptying house, "this is just housekeeping." Laura tried once more to enter the guest house that afternoon, approaching the back door with arms folded and an expression like she might demand a final truce. The door didn't budge. Bridget had changed the lock earlier that morning, per Carter's instructions. From the window, Iris watched her try the knob once, twice, then give up. She turned back to the inside, where sunlight filtered through the curtain lace and dust motes danced in the quiet. That same afternoon, Iris opened the family storage chest, a heavy cedar box that had traveled from North Carolina to Charleston in the back of a Ford in 1969. Inside, swaddled in yellowing linen, were the pieces of furniture Laura had once insisted were hers, by aesthetic. The walnut side table, the brass-legged vanity stool, a hand-painted jewelry case from Iris's great-aunt. Bridget appeared at her side. "You're really giving it away?" "Donation truck comes Friday," Iris replied, brushing off a carved edge. "Laura thinks inheritance is a reward. I always saw it as responsibility." Bridget helped carry each piece out to the porch. At noon, they hammered a small wooden sign into the flower bed near the guesthouse front step. Bridget had carved it earlier in the week, her thumb still wrapped in a Band-Aid. Block letters, burned into oak, still standing. Iris stood back, brushing her palms on her jeans, then turned to Bridget with a rare, amused glint in her eye. "Think they'll see it from the driveway?" Bridget smiled. "I kind of hope not." They stepped inside just as a knock sounded on the back screen. Deacon Shaw, holding a hand-woven basket and a brown paper parcel. "For your housewarming," he said, voice soft as ever. "Should have brought a fire extinguisher," Iris replied dryly. He smiled and set the basket down on her kitchen table. Spiced peach preserves, sourdough starter, and Psalm 46, handwritten. "God is our refuge and strength," Iris recited, already knowing. Deacon nodded. "And an ever-present help in trouble." He touched her arm gently. "You did it the right way, Miss Iris. You moved them without ever lifting your voice." She looked out the kitchen window toward the main house. The curtains were gone. The rooms echoed with exit. "I learned a long time ago," she said, "that yelling never wins the room. Paperwork does." The clock on the wall ticked noon. The sun hit the garden just right, illuminating the ivy-lined fence. Bridget opened the paper parcel Deacon had delivered. Inside, a painted tile, hand-glazed, with a single magnolia bloom in soft whites and blues. She held it up. "I think it belongs above the door," she said. "Hang it," Iris replied. Bridget grabbed a nail and a hammer. Outside, the moving truck rolled away. Laura and Tom stood on the sidewalk, boxed and bewildered, watching the only home they'd ever claimed crumble behind them. The truck came back just after 9, not a luxury moving service, not even the discreet company Iris had chosen for the initial pack-up. This one was loud, orange, peeling logo on the side that read, "Easy Move Carolina," like a promise no one believed. Tom stood beside it, arms folded, eyes sunken, watching as two underpaid college kids wrestled a scratched armoire onto the lift. Laura hovered behind them, directing like a flailing conductor, barking corrections no one heeded. The neighbors began to emerge. Curtains fluttered, doors opened just wide enough for someone to lean on a frame, sip their morning coffee, and pretend this wasn't the most satisfying entertainment they'd had since the last HOA scandal. From the porch across the street, old Mr. Halverson gave a slow wave. Beside him, his wife leaned toward him and said, "Just loud enough." She finally ran out of luck. 3 houses down, the Fontaines smiled into their mugs. "Guess the brunches won't be so noisy now," the husband said. Bridget sat on the guest house steps, one ankle crossed over the other, sketchbook open on her lap. She wasn't drawing, just watching, documenting in her own way. Behind her, Iris stood in the garden, pruning shears in hand, gently snipping back a hydrangea that had bloomed too far too fast. She wore her wide-brimmed sun hat, the same one Laura used to call overly nostalgic for a time she never lived in. She hummed as she worked, something low, steady, a tune only she seemed to know. The truck engine coughed as it reversed. More boxes disappeared behind the metal door. Tom shuffled down the walkway, head low. He stopped beside the front gate, letting the weight of the neighborhood's gaze wash over him. Then, to no one in particular, he muttered, "We never really had it, did we?" The question hung there, quiet and rhetorical, like an apology that arrived too late to matter. Laura, from the top of the porch steps, turned to him like she'd been slapped. "Don't you start," she snapped, voice sharp enough to startle the movers. "This isn't my fault. This is her vendetta. She manipulated you." Tom didn't answer, didn't even blink. She moved toward him, arms flailing, voice rising. "You let her walk all over me. You stood there while she stole our home and now you act like we deserved it?" Neighbors started to look away, not out of discomfort, but out of boredom. They'd seen this before, just never with boxes in the background. Bridget glanced back toward the guest house. Iris hadn't even turned around. The old woman kept clipping, pulling weeds, nudging the soil with her trowel. Laura's voice shrieked one more time across the yard. "She's not better than me!" From the garden, Iris straightened slowly, removed her gloves, then walked inside without a word. She closed the blinds as she passed each window. 1, 2, 3. The world outside dimmed. The noise, still lingering in the driveway, softened against the fabric of privacy. Back outside, the movers finally lowered the ramp. One snapped the latch shut. The truck's ignition rattled back to life. Bridget stood and brushed the dust from her jeans. "Can I stay with you this summer?" she asked, her voice quiet but certain. Iris paused in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame. "You never left," she replied. The truck rumbled down the cul-de-sac, Laura chasing behind it with a half-zipped suitcase and a phone pressed to her ear. Tom didn't follow. He sat down on the brick steps and stared at the garden. Inside, Iris lit a single candle on her kitchen counter. No ceremony, no guests, just light. The Charleston Women's Forum met twice a year in a historic brick hall off Rutledge Avenue. Whitewashed walls, exposed beams, and a creaky stage that had hosted everything from suffragette reenactments to cookbook launches. But today, the chairs were full before the bell even rang. The flyer had gone up quietly. "The Power of Paperwork, a talk by Iris Lancaster." Subheader, "On Boundaries, Deeds, and the Women Who Wrote Them First." Bridget adjusted the tripod near the back row, her phone set to record. She hadn't needed to ask Iris for permission, just a glance and a nod that said, "If you think it matters, capture it." At 11 a.m., sharp, Iris stepped onto the stage. No podium, just a stool, a wireless mic, and a file folder in her hand. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was reverent. She wore no pearls, no blazer, just navy slacks, a pressed white blouse, and the look of a woman who had lived more lives than she'd ever had to explain. She waited 5 seconds before speaking, long enough to still the room. Then she began. I was raised by a woman who taught me how to iron pillowcases and sign my name in cursive. Same weight, every letter. I thought for a long time those were two separate skills. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room. But it turns out, women like us have always built legacies with things other people thought were small. Folded linens, organized receipts, the quiet dignity of knowing exactly where the deed is and who signed it. She paused, then opened the folder. This is a copy of my property title. My husband left it to me. My son forgot that. My daughter-in-law tried to rewrite it. But it turns out, paper lasts longer than performance. A few murmurs. One woman near the front whispered, "Yes," without meaning to. Iris continued, "I'm not here to tell you to be angry. I'm here to tell you to be prepared. Paper is patient. But it does not forget. The world may not want your name on the deed, but it cannot erase it if you wrote it in pen." From the back row, Bridget held her breath. Iris closed the folder and rested her hands on her knees. "We are told to stay quiet, so I did. I stayed quiet long enough to build a structure under someone else's stage. I made sure the exit signs were installed, and then, when it was time," she smiled, "I pulled the plug on the lights." The room broke into applause. Not thunderous, roaring. Margot dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief in the front row. Carter, seated beside her, gave a rare half-smile and nodded once, approval without embellishment. Deacon Shaw stood toward the end, offering a quiet prayer under his breath. May the builders of quiet things be seen in loud ways. Outside the hall, a long wooden table had been set for the reception. Lemon water, pressed floral napkins, and a small donation box marked, "The Miss Iris Literacy Fund for Girls." By the end of the luncheon, the box overflowed. What the guests didn't know, what Iris had only told Carter and Bridget, was that she'd already donated $75,000 from the home sale proceeds. The fund would underwrite books, tuition stipends, and weekend writing retreats for high school girls in Charleston public schools. "I figured," she had said to Carter weeks earlier, "someone should inherit something that matters." Bridget packed up the camera gear as guests mingled around Iris like planets orbiting their sun. "People online are already sharing the clip," she said. "It's going viral in the local feed. Someone hashtagged you as Estate Queen." Iris chuckled. "Let them, as long as they spell my name right." The crowd began to thin, chairs pushed in, napkins folded. Margot came over last, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "You broke every rule of Southern silence today," she said with a smirk. "Then let's not whisper about it," Iris replied. As the women laughed, a shadow moved just outside the window. Bridget turned her head. Across the street, parked beneath a magnolia tree, Laura sat in the passenger seat of a beat-up sedan, windows down, sunglasses on, face unreadable, watching, not speaking, just watching. Bridget looked back at her grandmother. "She's here." Iris didn't even turn. "Let her see," she said. She never understood what she was standing on. The conference room inside Carter Webb's law office smelled like cedar and ink. No view, no distractions, just books, signatures, and silence, the kind that makes things permanent. Iris sat at the head of the table, her fingers steepled, glasses perched low on her nose. Beside her, Bridget flipped through a bound copy of the documents, stopping only to underline one sentence. Beneficiary, Bridget May Lancaster. Role, steward. Not owner, not seller, steward. Across from them, Carter closed the final folder and snapped the leather strap. "It's done," he said. "The trust is irrevocable. Disbursement is locked. No amendments unless Bridget files them. And even then, the charter restricts any funds from going to bloodline beneficiaries who were explicitly excluded." He didn't need to name them. Tom, Laura. Their names were etched in absence. Iris leaned back. "No one inherits chaos from me, not anymore." Carter slid one more envelope across the table. "I also filed your final wishes to the digital trust vault. Video message secure, password protected." Bridget looked up. "You recorded something?" Iris didn't smile. "Just a reminder that silence isn't the same as absence." They signed the last page with matching black pens. Bridget's signature was slower, her hand still learning to hold authority. but it was steady. "I trust her," Iris said, as if reading Carter's thoughts. "She's not interested in legacy. That's why she'll protect it." Outside, the summer air hung warm but forgiving. The front lawn of the guest house, now officially Iris's home on the tax rolls, had been reshaped into something softer. Brick edging, fresh mulch, a wooden arbor covered in young jasmine vines. Inside, the living room walls had been painted a pale sage green. The guest room was now Bridget's studio, complete with a vintage drafting table rescued from a salvage yard and restored by Deacon Shaw. Its surface was already smudged with charcoal dust and ambition. "I never thought you'd carve out space for me," Bridget said, turning in a slow circle, arms spread like she could stretch wide enough to believe it. "You carved it yourself," Iris replied. "I just stopped pretending the house was full." Later that week, the old house across the yard was renamed. The Callaways commissioned a discreet bronze plaque, mounted by the front steps and bracketed by camellias. The Hawthorne House, where roots were rewritten. Iris walked past it only once, then never again. That chapter was shelved, bound, and catalogued. But Charleston remembered everything. Bridget scrolled her phone one evening as Iris clipped coupons by the sink. Her breath caught. She didn't speak, just tilted the screen toward her grandmother. A screenshot. Facebook post from Laura Lancaster. Caption: "Eviction is cruel. Any friends in the area with a spare room or short-term rental, please DM." Starting over. Below it, a string of comments. Half pity, half polite silence. "She got kicked out?" Bridget whispered. Iris didn't flinch. "She got caught living in a house built on someone else's name." She folded another coupon, and then she ran out of names. The wind picked up outside, ruffling the curtains. From the window, they could see the glow from the newly named Hawthorne House, soft and golden, like a page being turned. Bridget stood and grabbed her sketchbook. "I want to draw this," she said. "Not her, this." Iris nodded once. "Then draw it honest." They sat by the open window, quiet, as the sky shifted from pink to pewter. The magnolias outside were blooming again. Late, out of season, but sure. At the edge of the garden, the still-standing sign caught the last light. The house across the yard had new curtains, the guest house had new stories, and Charleston had one less illusion pretending to be royalty. The first children arrived just after 9, holding sack lunches and curiosity in equal measure. They filed through the garden gate in 2s and 3s, some shy, others already asking questions. A teacher from Gadsden Elementary trailed behind, pointing out the camellias, the jasmine, the sign near the arbor that read in brushed bronze, "Legacy is behavior, not blood." Iris stood on the porch of the guest house, watching the garden fill with chatter. She wore linen slacks and an old sun hat now freckled with bleach marks. In one hand, she held a pitcher of lemonade. In the other, a pair of gardening gloves folded like prayer. "This was always the better part of the house," she told Bridget, who stood beside her with a clipboard and a pen behind her ear. Bridget glanced at the rows of hand-painted stepping stones, each one made by a child from the first cohort Iris had invited in. "It was the invisible part," she said. "They just never thought to look." Every Saturday now, the garden opened to students from across the district. No fanfare, no signage, just an open gate and an open door. Bridget had started hosting weekend poetry readings beneath the magnolia tree. Low-slung beanbags, folding chairs in mismatched colors, a Bluetooth speaker, and sometimes a pitcher of sweet tea if it was hot enough. Kids who had never read out loud in class now passed the mic like it was a baton, their voices blooming where gossip once withered. "This one's called If I Were the Sky," a 4th grader said one Sunday. Iris closed her eyes as he read, the wind carrying each word like something sacred. Afterward, Deacon Shaw stepped forward in his pressed shirt and worn leather shoes. He offered a short blessing, nothing formal, nothing too Sunday, but his voice carried like scripture. "May what grows here never forget who planted it," he said. Bridget nodded, already jotting it into the margins of her notebook. Inside the guest house, Iris had made one final change. The fireplace, long unused and framed by a mantel carved decades ago by Henry's hands, now held a single photograph in an oval frame, her wedding photo, black and white, Iris in a dress with lace sleeves, Henry grinning too wide, their hands tangled like roots. She'd taken it out of storage the day the trust was finalized, dusted the glass, hung it herself. I wanted to remember the man, she told Margot later, not the mess he left behind. Margot visited that Friday with 2 lemon bars and a stack of legal mail Iris didn't care to open. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the garden wall, their shoes off, their laughter hushed but real. "You turned insult into invitation," Margot said, nodding toward the garden path where children's footprints still left soft trails in the dirt. "No," Iris replied. "I just stopped mistaking silence for approval." Margot leaned back. "Still, you could have scorched the earth." "I did," Iris said, sipping her tea. "And then I planted over it." A soft breeze caught the wind chimes. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked past 5. Bridget came out with a fresh pitcher and a stack of paper programs, next week's reading schedule. She sat between them without asking. "Do you think they'll remember this?" she asked. Iris smiled, slow and certain. "They won't forget it." Down the street, a car slowed. An unfamiliar driver. New neighbors, probably. The Hawthorne house was someone else's now. Good people, quiet, the kind who waved and didn't ask questions. The way the garden liked it. Back at the fence, one final student lingered, fingertips brushing the petals of a peony, head tilted as if listening to something older than the wind. Then he turned and ran to catch up with the others. From the porch, Iris watched him go. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The gate would be open next Saturday and the soil would still be soft. It was a Sunday night, the kind of southern evening that felt borrowed from a painting, soft amber light pooling under the eaves, cicadas murmuring low in the trees, the sky slipping from rose to indigo without apology. Iris lit the last candle herself. There were no place cards, no floral arrangements, just an old oak table set under the arbor, strung with warm bulbs and covered in a quilted table runner Bridget had stitched by hand from fabric scraps they'd found in the cedar chest. 6 chairs, only 6. Carter and Margot arrived first, bringing a bottle of small-batch bourbon and a lemon tart from the downtown bakery Margot swore by. "I didn't bake," she said, setting it on the sideboard, "but I did plate it with charm." Deacon Shaw followed soon after, fresh from evening service, a rolled-up hymn tucked under his arm. "You hosting or preaching?" Iris asked as she handed him a glass of peach shrub. "Only bearing witness tonight," he said with a smile. This flock already found its shepherd. Bridget placed mismatched linen napkins at each seat. Hand-poured votives flickered against their wine glasses. The night was still, but not stiff. By 7:05 everyone was seated. No latecomers, no one texting under the table. Just chosen people, people who had stayed, who had seen the cracks and climbed in anyway. Bridget stood first, glass in hand. "I've only ever made one toast," she said, her voice steady but soft. And it wasn't really a toast. It was more like a question in disguise. "But this one's clear." She looked down the table, locking eyes with Iris. "To the woman who knew exactly what she owned and never let anyone else name it for her." They clinked glasses, slowly, intentionally. Iris raised hers last. There was no tremble, no trace of the sharpness she used to wield like a shield. Just peace, aged like something worth pouring twice. "No bitterness left in the bottle," she said simply. "Only proof." They drank, and when they laughed, it wasn't polite, it was full. Round, punctuated by real stories, not performative ones. Someone put on a scratchy vinyl record of Ella Fitzgerald. Margot sang along under her breath. Carter took seconds of the tart. Deacon quoted a psalm between bites of roasted chicken. And Bridget passed around a stack of Polaroids she'd taken over the past few months. Smudged thumbs, garden soil, the still-standing sign in 5 different lights. Iris didn't say much after that. She didn't need to. The music did the rest. The wind rustled the magnolias she had planted herself. Leaves danced in rhythm to nothing but their own weight. As night fell, one by one, her guests hugged her goodbye. No promises, no future favors owed, just warmth and presence offered freely. Bridget stayed behind to clear the table. "I'll finish this," she said. Iris touched her shoulder lightly. Let the moon do some of the work. Inside the guest house, the rooms were dim but familiar. Iris changed into a cotton nightgown and unpinned her hair. She walked the length of the hallway barefoot, the floor cool beneath her feet. From her armoire, she pulled out a folded quilt, the one her mother made the year Iris turned 12, all hand-stitched stars and windmill patterns. She laid it across her bed like it was a story she still knew by heart. Outside, a single wind chime gave one last note. Iris turned off the light, slipped beneath the quilt, closed her eyes, and thought, not of Laura's toast, or Tom's silence, or even the years of being sidelined, but of that moment when 6 glasses rose beneath her arbor. No tension, no performance, only truth. She toasted to break me, Iris thought, as sleep carried her gently beneath the weight of memory. I toasted to begin.